It always began the same way. The San Pedro coast, 1930. Nights here were quiet, but never empty. The smell of the ocean carried far inland, and the sound of waves reached even the streets above the harbor. On the docks, the air was heavy with salt and fog. The moon hung low enough to paint the water in silver. Jackie could see it as clearly as if she were standing there. The worn planks stretching out over the black tide, the mist moving in slow ribbons. She could feel the boards under her knees, the splinters biting at her palms. But she wasn't herself. She was him, the man they had come for. Footsteps closed in from behind, slow, heavy, unhurried. The tang of seawater was cut with something sharper. Iron. His blood. He tried to speak, but his voice wouldn't come. The figure ahead, hidden in shadow, lifted a lead pipe. The blow landed before he could move. Pain bloomed, vision swimming. Hands gripped his collar and hauled him toward the edge. His legs gave way. The moon fractured in the water below. Then, the drop. The ocean hit like stone. Salt water burned his throat, rushed his lungs. He kicked, clawed upward, but unseen hands pressed him down. The surface rippled above him, the dock twisting in the moonlight. She knew then she wasn't in her bed. She wasn't even in her own body. She was him, drowning. The hands didn't let go until the world went black. Jackie woke up with a sharp breath, her sheets damp and twisted. Her hands went to her head, half expecting blood. Nothing. Just her room. Just her. Except it didn't feel like just her. The memory, if that's what it was, stayed with her, salt, stinging, and cold. She turned to the clock, 12 a.m. The same as last night, the same as every night, since she moved into 593 West 11th Street. This was only the beginning. Hey everyone, hope you're all having a great day so far. Welcome back to an all-new episode of Darkly Speaking. I'm your host, Alex Kern, and before we dive in, I want to thank you all for the love and support in the first few episodes. Those were pre-recorded earlier this year, so this is the first one I'm recording since the launch, and I am genuinely over the freaking moon. I can't thank you enough. With spooky season creeping up on us fast, there are some exciting episodes and surprises in the works, so now's a good time to stick around. New episodes drop every Monday, and if you're already a fan, liking, rating, and following wherever you listen really helps support the show. And if you're on YouTube, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell so that you never miss a thing. Without further ado, let's go ahead and get into today's episode. Tonight, we're stepping into the real-life haunting known as the San Pedro haunting, one of the most violent and well-documented cases in U.S. history. Much of what you'll hear tonight comes from An Unknown Encounter, a true account of the San Pedro haunting by Barry Conrad and Jeff Wheatcraft, two of the original investigators who lived this case and its fallout firsthand. It began as small, strange disturbances inside a cramped San Pedro home and escalated into something darker. Jackie Hernandez came face to face with not one, but two entities that refused to let her go, and at times seemed determined to break her. This wasn't just told in whispers, it was filmed, investigated, and pulled apart by parapsychologists and researchers, and what they found didn't fit the usual ghost story. Jackie Hernandez was 23, pregnant, and starting over with their 2-year-old son after leaving a marriage that had worn her down. In November of 1988, she moved into a small rented bungalow at 593 West 11th Street in San Pedro, a town whose history she hadn't given much thought. San Pedro, once its own city, now a port town on the southern edge of Los Angeles, has always been defined by restless waters and an equally restless history. Long before Spanish ships appeared in the 1500s, the peninsula was sacred land to the Tongva people, the original stewards of the Los Angeles basin. For thousands of years, the Tongva thrived here in villages like Chuigna along the bluffs and Sueña further inland. They were expert fishermen and traders, their networks stretching the length of the California coast. Their homes, made from tool reeds, blended into the landscape, and their spiritual connection to the land ran deep. The arrival of Spanish explorers marked the beginning of their forced displacement, In the mid-1500s, Spanish monks from Mission San Gabriel Archangel began using the San Pedro harbor as a vital trading post for Spain and Mexico. This expansion came at the expense of the Tongva, who faced disease, forced labor, and cultural erasure. Over time, the land shifted from Spanish to Mexican to American control, but the Tongva's presence never fully faded. Some locals believe their voices still ride the ocean wind. In 1784, the first Spanish land grant in California, Rancho San Pedro, was awarded to Juan José Dominguez. Cementing colonial claims over land the Tongva had lived on for millennia. More than a century later, San Pedro would be annexed by Los Angeles in 1909 to secure a deep-water port, forever changing the coastline. Massive dredging projects, breakwaters, and piers reshaped the shoreline, transforming it into one of the busiest harbors in the world. South of the harbor lies the Sunken City, once a quiet, affluent neighborhood perched along the coastal cliffs. In the 1920s, gradual land movement and erosion began to split the earth open, cracking streets and foundations. By 1929, the area was completely abandoned, leaving behind fractured sidewalks, staircases to nowhere, and the skeletal remains of homes. Over time, it became a place of legend, some calling it cursed, others claiming to hear whispers in the ocean wind. San Pedro's maritime history is steeped in tragedy. The fog here hides dangers, ships that never returned, sailors lost in sudden squalls, phantom vessels seen drifting in the mist. In 1929, the passenger steamer SS San Juan collided with an oil tanker, sending dozens to their deaths. In the 1930s, a fishing boat was found adrift, provisions intact but the crew missing without a trace. The harbor's dangers weren't only natural. During Prohibition, San Pedro became a smuggling hub where rival gangs fought over control of the ports, leaving bodies in the water and blood on the docks. Some believe those who were wronged still linger. Jackie knew none of this and wouldn't have cared if she had. She wasn't here for ghost stories. She came here for survival, for a fresh start. At 23, with 2-year-old Jamie on her hip and another child on the way, she was ready to rebuild after years in a marriage that had drained her emotionally, physically, and spiritually. The house on 11th Street was meant to be her refuge. But the moment she stepped inside, she felt it. A subtle, unshakable weight in the air, as if the place had been waiting for her. Even her cat refused to cross the threshold, stopping dead at the doorway, ears pinned back. Still, Jackie didn't have the luxury of turning back. She unpacked, found work as a waitress, took on cleaning jobs, and enrolled in night classes. The days blurred into exhaustion, and at night when the city was quiet, the silence inside the house wasn't restful. It pressed in. Creaks came from empty rooms, cold spots appeared without reason. The hair on her arms rose when she passed certain doorways. She told herself it was nothing, but deep down, she already knew. She wasn't alone. The first few months after Jackie moved in were quiet enough to ignore, just the occasional misplaced object, a knock in the night, or the faint creak of footsteps in the attic. Even the foul smell that drifted through the house at random could be brushed aside. Old houses settle, pipes groan, air shifts. But there was something about these moments that resisted explanation. The knocks in the walls carried no rhythm, no logical source. The shadows in the corners felt too solid, like they were occupying space rather than merely falling into it. And the smell, rot, sharp, and sour, never lingered in the same spot twice, as if it was following her. Still, Jackie reasoned her way through it, until the unease began to take root. It was early 1989 when the first incident made that unease impossible to ignore. Jackie's estranged husband Al had temporarily moved in while dealing with his own living situation. Their relationship was tense, but she agreed for the sake of the children. His presence, however, did nothing to relieve the weight in the air, a weight neither of them could name. One evening, Jackie walked past her desk in the living room. Al sat at it, flipping through papers, their neighbor lounging on the couch nearby. Nothing unusual. Then, without warning, the pencil holder on the desk lifted into the air, and then it shot toward Jackie with violent force. Pencils scattered across the floor as she stumbled back, completely terrified. Jackie and Al locked eyes and searching for an explanation that didn't exist. There was no draft, no trick, just a new certainty. Something in the house had moved from subtle to deliberate. It was always midnight. Jackie would wake, sometimes from a nightmare, sometimes from the quiet, but with the absolute feeling of being watched. One night, she rose to use the bathroom, and as she stepped into the hallway, A sharp noise broke the stillness. Every window shade in the house snapped up at once. The sudden motion was jarring, and the cold spill of streetlight through every uncovered pane turned the room harsh and alien. Jackie stood frozen, her stomach sinking. Slowly, she lowered each shade again, hands trembling. She thought about wind, air pressure, but deep down, she already knew better. And then came the night she saw him. Again, midnight. Again, she woke. Moving toward the bathroom, she passed through her children's bedroom and stopped cold. A man sat cross-legged on the bunk bed, thin, gray, corpse-like. His red flannel shirt hung loose on a skeletal frame, gray pants wrinkled and worn, heavy boots resting on the floor. But it was his eyes, hollow pits filled with something she couldn't name that locked her in place. Her breath shallowed, her feet felt heavy. Then, he moved. She gasped and blinked. He was gone. The air was still thick with him, pressing against her chest. The next night, it happened again. Jackie soon learned that she wasn't the only one encountering these disturbances. Her friend and neighbor, Susan Castaneda, once a skeptic, was sitting in the living room with Jackie when a framed painting ripped itself from the wall and flew into the kitchen. Not long after, a lamp that had sat unmoving lifted and slammed to the floor, shattering its bulb in an explosive spray of glass. Whatever was in the house was gaining confidence. In April 1989, Jackie gave birth to her daughter Samantha. Between work, school, and sleepless nights with a newborn, she had no energy to spare, but the presence in the house didn't care. If anything, it seemed to watch her more closely now. One night, when Jackie was out of town, her friend Darlene Mungia agreed to stay with the kids. At some point in the evening, as Darlene stood in the living room, the atmosphere shifted. She turned toward the hallway. Just as she was about to step into the bedroom, she heard it. A deep, guttural voice, low and inhuman. "Don't come in here." It wasn't loud, but the weight behind it was enough to root her in place. The presence here wasn't just watching, it was guarding, warning, and ready to harm. Darlene stayed in the living room until Jackie returned. Weeks later, Jackie was in the kitchen when she noticed water pouring from the light switch. Yes, water pouring from the light switch. There were no pipes behind that wall, no leak, no reason, and yet it dripped steadily, as though the house itself was weeping. The water stopped as suddenly as it started, leaving only silence. Jackie stood there for a long moment, staring at the damp wall, trying to make sense of it. But the unease didn't fade. It shifted. It crept upward, settling on the space above her head. The attic. Days went by, and it began as a thought, an odd, persistent pull toward the attic. Jackie told herself it was curiosity. She'd once heard a friend say she found money hidden in her attic after moving into a new home. She unfolded the ladder and climbed. Peering inside, she looked around the dark and then noticed something out of the corner of her eye. Her heart stopped. A disembodied head floated out of the dark. Its mouth gaped open, its hollow eyes fixed on hers as it hurled towards her. Jackie screamed and fell backward down the ladder. The attic hatch slammed shut with a force that rattled the walls. Something was in that house, and now it was no longer hiding. By now, months of nightly fear, violent disturbances, and an unshakable sense of being hunted had worn Jackie thin. Her friend, Susan, had witnessed enough to know this was more than imagination. Objects moved on their own, voices spoke when no one else was there, and the air itself seemed to push back. One night, watching a local TV special on paranormal investigations, Susan saw a segment on a team of parapsychologists renowned for their work on poltergeist cases. At the center was Dr. Barry Taff, veteran investigator of more than 2,500 cases, versed in everything from electromagnetic anomalies to the psychological toll of hauntings. Alongside him was his colleague, Carrie Gaynor, whose cases included the events that inspired The Entity, in which investigators documented violent attacks on a woman by an unseen force. The team also included Jeff Wheatcraft, a photographer with years of investigative experience and a grounded skepticism, and Barry Conrad, an Emmy Award-winning cameraman accustomed to capturing the strange and unexplainable on film. If anyone could help Jackie, it was them. Days later, they stood at the door of 593 West 11th Street, cameras and instruments in hand, unaware that they were about to step into one of the most violent and documented hauntings in modern history. The summer heat clung to San Pedro on the evening of August 8, 1989, as the investigative team Barry Conrad, Jeff Wheatcraft, Larry Brooks, and parapsychologist Dr. Barry Taff pulled up to 593 West 11th Street. From the outside, the small bungalow sat quietly, its windows dark, almost indifferent to the turmoil inside. But that night, the team wasn't just there to record claims. They were walking straight into something far more dangerous. Jackie met them at the door. Her expression said more than words ever could. Pale skin, dark circles carved beneath her eyes, the posture of someone who hadn't slept soundly in months. She stepped back to let them in, and the moment they crossed the threshold, a heavy tension seemed to press in around them. The air felt dense, thick, as if the house itself was holding its breath. As gear was unpacked, cameras, audio recorders, lights, Dr. Taff caught a smell clinging to the room. It was foul, yes, but it was more than just the scent of rot or mildew. It was sharp, invasive, and wrong. The smell he remembered from the entity case in 1974, one he'd never been able to explain. Jackie walked them through what she'd experienced. The disembodied head hovering in the corner, the shifting black shapes, and the gray corpse-like man who had stood in her children's bedroom. Jeff Wheatcraft, a seasoned photographer with years of field experience, listened without interruption. He'd heard every variety of ghost story before, and habit kept him skeptical. That skepticism stayed with him until he climbed into the attic. Determined to see for himself, Jeff climbed the attic ladder and disappeared into the dark. Dust drifted through the beam of his flashlight, the air stale and unmoving. The attic was quiet, but the atmosphere wasn't. He felt it before he saw anything, a heavy, almost tangible sense of being watched. Something in the space around him seemed to be waiting. Jeff raised his camera, snapping photos over his shoulder. 1, 2, then, on the third click, the camera was ripped from his hands. Not dropped, pulled. Forcefully. The force sent Jeff stumbling back, heart racing as he scrambled down the ladder, his voice shaking as he tried to explain what had just happened. When Jeff and Barry went back up, they found the camera in pieces. Lens in one corner, body in the other. It hadn't simply fallen, it had been thrown. Jeff's skepticism wavered. He would later admit, quote, "I knew there had to be something. There had to be something in that attic," end quote. But whatever was up there wasn't done. Each time Jeff re-entered the attic, his camera refused to work, completely dead, until he stepped back down, when it would function again as if nothing had happened. Then came the shove. As Jeff was climbing down the ladder, he felt an overwhelming force slam against his back. Jackie and Barry, watching from below, saw him lurch forward. Jeff later recalled, quote, "It felt like a huge hand just pushing my back," end quote. When Jeff and Barry finally stepped onto the floor, the house seemed to respond. A deep, rhythmic pounding rattled the ceiling, furious, deliberate, as if something inside had been disturbed. Jackie described it simply, quote, "And the whole feeling of the room just changed," end quote. Still, Jeff wasn't ready to back down. He climbed the ladder one last time, flashlight in hand, scanning the darkness. Suddenly, 3 small flashes of light appeared in quick succession. Then, total darkness. His flashlight flickered, and from the shadows, a shape began to form. A formless, pure black mass that seemed to swallow the light around it. It moved slowly, silently, before dissolving into the air. Jeff saw it, and for the skeptic, nothing would ever be the same. The next day, Jeff's film was developed. In one of the attic shots, a glowing orb hovered in the corner. No obvious source, no reflection, just light, suspended in darkness. Weeks passed, and on the early morning of August 26th at 4:16 a.m., the house delivered its most terrifying sign yet. Thick, dark red liquid began oozing from the walls, the ceilings, even the kitchen cabinets. Jackie stood frozen, watching in disbelief as it dripped and pooled onto the floor. The team moved quickly, collecting the substance in bottles for lab testing. When the results came back, the shock deepened. It was human blood plasma. Not just any plasma, but with unusually high copper and iodine levels. And the most unsettling detail of all, it was identified as male blood. There were no hidden bodies, no signs of violent crime in the home's history, no logical explanation for how or why this could happen. Dr. Barry Taff later admitted, quote, "This sounds like a bad movie. It sounds like a bad novel. But this was anything but. And it occurred repeatedly. It wasn't just one occasion," end quote. 2 days later, Jackie called Barry at 10:30 a.m., her voice urgent, quote, "I got it. I got a picture of the lights," end quote. She'd finally managed to capture the strange dancing lights they'd all seen flicker through the house. That morning, Jackie's friend Chrissy, staying over for the night, had seen them too. Bright orbs floating and twisting along the ceilings as if they were alive. It felt like something was trying to take form, and whatever it was getting stronger. The encounters weren't just escalating, they were becoming more violent. And in the early hours of September 4th, 1989, Jackie and the team of investigators would face the most horrifying night yet. Just after midnight, Jackie left a panicked voicemail for Barry Conrad. Something was happening in the house. Objects flying across rooms, children's toys levitating, low moaning and ragged breathing drifting from the attic, doors slamming shut on their own. In the kitchen, lights flickered wildly like an unseen hand was playing with the switch. Barry arrived not long after with photographer Jeff Wheatcraft and his childhood friend Gary Boehm in tow. They came armed with cameras and recording gear. Jeff hadn't set foot inside in almost a month, still shaken by his last encounter in the attic. But tonight, he was determined to face it again. At 12:50 a.m., Jeff and Gary climbed into the attic, and at first, nothing. Dust spiraled lazily through the beams of their flashlights. The smell, stale, faintly rotten, hung heavy. Barry, Jackie, and Susan stayed below, listening to the muffled creak of footsteps overhead. Then, a sharp crack and a scream. Barry and Jackie bolted to the attic entrance. Jeff was hanging from one of the rafters. A length of clothesline had been looped over a nail, wound tightly around his neck, and twisted his head to an unnatural 45 degrees. His body hung limp, suspended. His breath came shallow and slow, as if something held him in place, paused him mid-movement. Gary, half blind in the dark, raised his camera and hit the flash. In that split second of light, the scene seared into view. He lunged forward, bracing Jeff's weight with his own and clawing at the cord until it came free. It took seconds, but it felt like forever. When Jeff hit the floor, he collapsed, gasping. His hands shook as he tried to steady himself. Days earlier, the attic had been searched. No rope, no clothesline, nothing. And yet, here he was, hoisted into the air by something they still couldn't see. Later, Jeff would only manage, quote, "I was lost in time and space. I didn't know what was happening," end quote. He remembered almost nothing except the choking pressure and the sensation of being pulled into a void. The headaches started immediately. They'd last for days. His sister, Connie Wheatcraft, would later remind people Jeff was a skeptic, the kind who could explain away almost anything. But this, he had no explanation. While Jeff sat recovering, Barry kept filming until a sudden flash of light hit him square in the face. His camera went black and Barry crumpled to the floor, unconscious. Jackie and Gary rushed to him until minutes later he came to. The house seemed to be moving through them one by one, attacking in quick succession. Jackie herded her children outside to the patio, Susan following closely behind, and that's when Susan froze. 5-month-old Samantha had a fresh red mark across her forehead, shaped almost like a handprint. Jackie grabbed her daughter in complete terror while scanning the patio. No one else had been near her. By 3 a.m., Jackie had reached her breaking point. Whatever had taken hold of that house was no longer just tormenting her. It had gone after her friends, and it had nearly killed Jeff. She made her choice. She gathered her children and walked out of 593 West 11th Street and didn't look back. The investigators followed soon after. Jeff Wheatcraft would never set foot in that little San Pedro bungalow again. But the house wasn't done leaving its mark. The next day, as Barry reviewed the footage from that night, something strange emerged. In frame after frame, tiny comet-like lights drifted across the darkness, weaving behind Jackie and Jeff as though they were alive. They weren't lens flares, they weren't camera glitches. Parapsychologists call them, quote, spirit lights, orbs of energy in the first stage of taking form. And if that's true, then something was trying to manifest, and after September 4th, it wasn't finished with them yet. The September 4th attack marked a turning point in the San Pedro haunting. Up until then, the entity had been frightening, even aggressive, but this was something else entirely. It had crossed into the realm of deadly. Jackie may have left 593 West 11th Street, but the entity was not finished with her, not even close. I'm going to continue with Jackie's story next week in part 2, where we uncover chilling new events and the terrifying reality that this haunting was far from over. What followed in the months ahead would take this haunting to terrifying new heights, a path that would lead to bizarre new manifestations, shocking evidence, and a terrifying connection to a real-life murder mystery buried in San Pedro's past. That's all for today's episode. If you want to see some of the real photographs captured during the September 4th investigation, including the so-called spirit lights, visit darklyspeakingpodcast.com for full source materials and show notes. And if you want to watch the video version of this episode, head over to our YouTube channel at Darkly Speaking Podcast. Last but not least, follow us on social media at Darkly Speaking Podcast for more strange, chilling content. And if you've had your own paranormal encounter, send it in. Your story might just be featured in an upcoming episode. Thank you so much for joining me for part 1 of the San Pedro haunting. Next week in part 2, the investigation may leave 593 West 11th Street, but the haunting doesn't stay behind.